All right, welcome back to another episode of Brotherly Love in the District. Tristan here, along with Jacob, and Jacob's going to go ahead and tell you guys what we're going to get into.
Yeah, so on today's episode, we're going to be talking about this previous week's NFL games and this upcoming week's. Going on into hockey, the Caps continue to struggle, and the Flyers continue to impress. And finally, going on into the World Series, the Phillies have dropped 2 games in a row. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, so we'll start in the NFL like we always do. We'll start off first with the Washington Commanders going out and getting the game-winning field goal against Indianapolis over the rookie quarterback Sam Ellinger.
It was
And
a game-winning extra point.
extra point, okay.
Yeah.
But excuse me, I saw that wrong. But it was the battle of the backups in this one, Sam Ellinger and Taylor Heineke, and I honestly think that the team just seems to rally behind Heineke, which we've said in the last week. We've said for a couple weeks now. Just it seems like they seem more connected with Taylor Heineke.
Yeah, the whole team has elevated its play. The defense played a great game, limited. I know it's a struggling offense, but only to 16 points. They got 2 turnovers. I mean, you really can't ask much more from them. The offense had 2 pretty good drives. That first opening touchdown drive was great. Heineke made great throws, some great calls, but in the middle there is where I think the issue was. Scott Turner's offense just wasn't good enough in the middle of the game all the way up to that last drive. We couldn't get the run game going at all, and I think that contributed to the fact that we only had 2 touchdowns in the entire game. So I would like to see that be addressed more. I think if we're going to want a chance of beating the Vikings and the Eagles in these next 2 weeks, we're going to need to see better offensive output because our defense is actually playing better, and we just got rid of William Jackson, who just didn't fit our scheme. All right. Yeah. So I'm just gonna need to see more consistent offense from them. I mean, we saw Heineke in that last drive. He made some very clutch throws. There was some great play calling. Terry McLaurin had one of the best catches I think I've ever seen. It was a 50-50 ball against Stephon Gilmore, and he just grabbed it out of his hands, and that ultimately led to us getting to the 1-yard line, Heineke doing the QB sneak, and we getting the game-winning extra point. So overall, I'd say a pretty decent game in some areas, but there are still some things that we need to address. For me, it's mainly offensive because, like I said before, if we want a chance of competing with the Eagles and the Vikings, we're just going to need to see more consistent offense, especially in the red zone. And I think part of the key to that is getting the run game going because, as we saw against the Colts, when we can't do that, we're going to struggle.
I also think that, well, one, you mentioned how good the defense played. Any time that your team just makes the consensus number 2 running back in the league, going into the league number 1 only because Derrick Henry was hurt last season, but in my opinion, Derrick Henry's still miles above Jonathan Taylor. Not that Jonathan Taylor's a bad running back, but
Yeah.
they're just 2 different types of running backs. But I mean, anytime you hold the consensus number 2 NFL running back in the league to, barely any yards. I know he had one like 30-yard outbreak, but other than that, I mean, he didn't really do much in the game.
He only had 76 yards in the game, no touchdowns, and that's pretty good considering we were missing Cole Holcomb. But our front line really, really stepped up that game. I think that's one of the big reasons why we're able to win in terms of defensively. They had 2 sacks, but a lot of quarterback pressures. So a pretty good game defensively, but like I said, some things need to be addressed offensively.
And I'll tell you what, now that Heineke's back, I think Terry McLaurin plays so much better with Heineke. I think there's a better chemistry there than what Carson Wentz had with Terry McLaurin. So I think with Heineke, it looks like Terry McLaurin earns his money a lot easier than with Carson Wentz. But other than that, they do win that. They move to 4-4, and I mean, there's still a chance they can make the playoffs. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we're like tied for the last wild card spot with one other team. But yeah, 4-4 in other divisions in the NFC is actually good to be tied for number one, which is I think that says a lot about the NFC this year. I think it's pretty wide open, even
The
with the Eagles and Vikings having head and shoulders the best records. But yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see how it plays out because if the NFC East gets four teams in the playoffs, I don't. That might be one of the most shocking things that's ever happened in the
Yeah, because
past
I mean,
10 years.
going into this season, I think everyone expected the NFC East to probably be, if not the worst division, one of the worst divisions. They didn't
Yeah,
look great. I mean, I would say personally, I thought the Eagles looked like the best team in the division, and I thought they were going to get 10, 11, maybe even 12 wins, but I still didn't I didn't think they were going to be 8-0 going into week 9.
I
Cuz
I knew like all of the NFC East teams have pretty like easy schedules, but I didn't expect the Cowboys to only have two losses. I didn't expect the Eagles to be undefeated at this point. The Giants only have two losses, and we're somehow 4-4 after like
yeah,
there
you
was a
guys
point
this is your third straight win, right?
uh second.
Second straight
Yeah,
win.
when
Okay.
we were like 2-4 around there, I
You,
was really like thinking that okay, this could be a team that could get a top five pick. But I mean, credit to Rivera, he's turned things around. Jack Del Rio has changed. I don't know if he's changed some things, but I just think the team has gotten better at executing the defense. But I still think Scott Turner, even if we somehow manage to make a playoff run, I still want him gone. I just don't think he's I think this team could be very dangerous with a competent offensive coordinator.
I'll tell you what, the Eagles know about, winning and still getting rid of personnel. I mean, and it's not
Yeah.
like personnel leaving to go for other coaching jobs. It's they win and then they're like, "All right, you're out of here. Get out of here. We're done with you." They even did that after they won the Super Bowl. They got rid of a couple position coaches. They went through 5 position coaches in 5 years. Their current wide receiver coach excuse me, they went through 5 wide receiver coaches in 5 years, and their current wide receiver coach was the first one to have 2 straight years. Obviously, for multiple years, being that they kept on going through them. But is that all you have for? I did want to add one more thing. It's something that I'll mention once we get down because we are going to talk about the Texans game. Obviously, we're recording this on Friday, so it is after the Texans game. It's very rare that we have this situation, but we will talk about it. But one thing that I will mention later once we get to the Texans game, but I'll just mention now is one thing that makes the NFC East so good is yes, they might not be playing hard teams, but they find ways to win when they're playing bad,
Yeah.
which is something the Eagles did just last night on Thursday Night Football. So we'll talk about that after we talk about the Eagles against play against the Steelers, which again was we thought would be an absolute domination. It was.
It
Eagles
was.
came out. They did exactly what we thought they would. Went for a couple shot plays. AJ Brown had 150 yards on 8 receptions and 3 touchdowns in the first half, and AJ Brown just has Pittsburgh in shambles altogether. The last time he played him in Tennessee, he went for 6 for 150 and a touchdown. This week he goes for 156, I believe, and 3 touchdowns in the first half. So he just haunts Pittsburgh. They don't know what to do with him. You saw after the first touchdown, Minka Fitzpatrick go back to the bench, just like, dude, I don't know how he got that. I mean, that was just you see the strong hands from AJ Brown, an insane pickup over the offseason to get him over here. They end up benching their starters in the fourth quarter just to get them rest coming up for the Thursday night game. And I think the biggest thing here is they had a single play in the red zone. In that one play in the red zone they scored on. They went
Yeah.
they went they scored 4 touchdowns outside of the red zone, all 20 plus yard plays, obviously 3 shot plays to AJ Brown, one to Zach Pascal, and then they go into the red zone and Miles Sanders gets a rushing touchdown from 13 yards out. So the offense was just clicking on all cylinders. Had shot plays all over the place. And then just one quick note on defense, because I mean the defense looked good aside from that one drive where they kind of drove down the field, uh, and then they ran the trick play on the goal line to get Derek Watt that touchdown. They looked pretty decent. Javon Hargrave in that game looked like he was starting to catch on. I believe he had a sack. He had a couple QB pressures. He was one that, up to the Pittsburgh game, you were looking like, maybe they might not re-sign him. He doesn't look like it's that big of a deal to bring him back, especially with some of the depth that they're going to have at D tackle going into the future. But now, after that week, after this week he had, that I'll talk about here in just a second when we go to the Texans game, looks like they're going to have some hard decisions to make coming up in the offseason because they have a lot of contracts that are going to be tough. They got the Javon Hargrave contract. They're going to have Kaiser White, TJ Edwards, just a couple names on defense, James Bradbury, CJGJ. So they're going to have a couple big names just on defense to re-sign. Not to mention Miles Sanders on offense, a couple other players. So they're going to have some struggles over the offseason. I'm going to be interested to see how he does. Now, moving over to the Thursday night football game, like I said, this is where you see the difference between good teams and great teams. Good teams, if you don't play well, odds are you probably lose that game. Great teams, if you don't play well, you still find a way to win. Eagles go into Houston on Thursday night football, 13.5-point favorites on the road, which is rough because anytime you go from a Sunday and then have to travel to Houston, which I would imagine is probably a 2-hour flight to play on Thursday night football.
Yeah, like 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's not exactly an easy task for the Eagles, but they go to Houston, win 29-17. Like I said, they didn't look great going into the game. They didn't really get into their groove until the second half. And what was big is this was the first time they really had to play in the second half. I remember as I was watching the game, my dad was like, "Oh, this is gonna be scary. The Eagles never come out in the second half," and I was like, "Well, they've never had to come out in the second half, so it's gonna be interesting to see what happens here." And they came out, they took over the game. Javon Hargrave had 3 sacks in the game, and they ended up getting 2 more turnovers, and they are now plus 15 in their turnover margin, which is miles above the next closest. The next closest would be plus 6. And Eagles start 8-0 for the first time in team history. So they really came out. They played well last night, especially in the second half once they got their things going. The only things I would have to say is, one, Dameon Pierce is an absolute demon. That man
I think you guys really need to work on your run defense because going back to the Pittsburgh game, like Pittsburgh had some success with a lot of runners. Like they didn't have anybody over like 60 yards or something like that, but they had a lot of guys get some decent runs. And I think we saw with the Texans game that I think your run defense is something you need to work on. Like your defensive line does great in the pass rush, but I just think maybe it could be that your linebackers aren't.
I'll tell you what a big piece of it probably was. I think they're missing Jordan Davis. I think the difference between having, only a 5'10", 250-pound guy in the middle versus a 6'8", 350-pound guy in the middle is a world of a difference. So I think the without having Jordan Davis there, that was a big piece. But I'll tell you what, the run defense didn't play great in this game, but once they got them down to third down, the Eagles were pretty much set. The Texans only went 2 for 9 on third down, so once they got there, they really struggled. And Davis Mills only passed for 150 yards. He had an intercept, I believe.
2 picks.
He had 2 picks, yes, because I was trying to remember if that James Bradbury pick stood, because they ended up throwing a flag on that. So they stopped him once it got to an important game, once it got important. And I mean, Dameon Pierce, he amounts to 83% of the Texans offense. The only player who is higher is Josh Jacobs for the Raiders. He amounts to 84% of the Raiders offense. So, I mean, Dameon Pierce is just an absolute demon in the backfield. He is a great player. Looks like he's going to be great for the future. Kind of an under-the-radar running back, but he looks really good. And another fun fact, Texans have never beat the Eagles in their team history. So the Eagles continue that trend and winning Thursday Night Football 29-17 to move to 8-0 and still the number 1 team in the NFC East. Now, I still don't think they're the best team in the NFL. I still think the Bills hold that.
It's the Bills.
I'll tell you what, each week as they go along, something that about being undefeated yes, obviously you're playing great games, and while yes, they're playing hard teams, but as you go undefeated, every week it gets even harder to stay undefeated, no matter who you're playing. Because if you if you think about it, you don't want to lose that game, and the team you don't want to lose, especially like this week. You don't want to lose to the Texans and have that be your first loss. You don't want to lose to Washington, have that be your first loss, because that's going to be the Eagles' next game, which we'll talk about next week. So they have, as you go, it just gets harder and harder and harder to stay undefeated, because you not only do you have to still play at a high level, but you also have the thought of being undefeated weighing on your mind in the game. So I think they're doing a really good job just all together right now. They're dominating teams as they play, and I just hope that once they come to like week 13, week 14, they lose at least one game. I don't want them going into the playoffs undefeated. That's a team that's something that kind of hurts the team more, because
You're
you
gonna have a whole
yeah,
different level of pressure.
exactly. It's a whole different level of play. Those teams now, I mean, granted the NFC isn't playing great
No.
altogether right now, and it looks like the Eagles will have the first round bye, but still you're going to get harder teams to play in the playoffs than you are in the regular season. So I do want them to lose at least one game in the regular season to come back down to earth, because I don't think this is a team that could get a perfect season. Not yet, at least. There's not enough experience in the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, you still have your defensive line, but outside of that, it's a pretty young and inexperienced teams in
It's
terms
the
of
skill
playoff.
positions altogether
Yeah,
super
in
young.
terms, I mean, AJ Brown, like he's been to the playoffs with the Texans, but they didn't really do a lot, and
The Titans,
so
yeah.
yeah, you can't really do something there. And I just think that with this team, I think it'll really struggle with like a Mahomes or a Josh Allen, because they're going to be able to like your
Pick
defensive
apart the
line
defense.
isn't exactly the fastest in the league, so I think they'll be able to get outside the pocket. And I'd be interested to see how your defense copes with like a stand-up quarterback who can make those kinds of
A
throws.
pocket
So I'll be
quarterback, yeah.
interested. I'll be interested to see that. But you guys are playing great. The only thing I think you really need to address is your run defense, but I think that's down to Jordan Davis and the fact that your second level really doesn't have that like high level run stopping linebacker. But other than that, there's not a lot you
One
guys need to be worried about.
one other thing, I mean, this is one thing that I saw in the game was those speed rushers were giving the offensive tackles a world of trouble. You saw both Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson get beat off the ball, and Jerry Hughes, who I believe is 34, just absolutely running by them. And he
Yeah.
had wicked bend for a 34-year-old. You saw him get down and low and get under the tackle. So he had a great game, but you saw the tackles in a world of trouble going against speed rushers. So
Yeah,
that's
I
something
think
that's going to be interesting come the future.
yeah, I think we're going to see that against the Commanders because I don't know if Chase Young will be back by next week. He's back in practice, but I think that'll be interesting to see how you guys like cope with that because like the only thing the Commanders are top in the league at is pass rush. I'm pretty sure we're top 5 in all the categories. So I think it could be a close game just down to that fact
Uh, Other than that, I believe that's it. And
for the Eagles
yeah,
at least.
yeah. I mean, you guys have a game coming up on Sunday. So who do you guys play again?
The
Talk about this.
Vikings. It's
Vikings,
Kirk
yes.
Cousins' return to Washington for the first time since he left.
Which is so weird because he left, I believe, 5 years ago at this point.
Yeah, we've been to Minnesota, but he's actually never been back to Washington
So
or
I
Williamsburg.
think that's just kind of cool to see that it's been so long and he's just now coming back. And also another thing is like since it's been so long, I don't think anyone in Washington's really gonna care.
No, I
Just
think
like
he's gonna like get a lukewarm reception, but I do think the fan like it's gonna be a decent fan like show up because I think we're a little bit revitalized with the news that Dan Schneider's possibly looking to sell.
yeah, which we can mention a little bit more in depth after we talk
Yeah,
about
the
this.
fact we're up to 500 again, I just think this team has gotten a shot in the arm. Down to with Heineke, with down to the news of the team, it just feels like there's something different right now going on. It's nothing crazy like it's going to propel us to like a deep playoff run, but I feel like the passion is starting to come back a little bit, and I'm starting to feel it too because it feels like for the first time there's like actual like brightness possibly in the future, and it's not just a red herring. So that's good. But down to the Vikings game, I don't think we'll win. I predicted that yesterday when we did our predictions, but I think it could be interesting because obviously our defensive line is very good. And I don't think Chase Young is going to be back, but we've been able to supplement him, and the defense has been playing good these past 2 weeks. But like if we were to win, we'd need to get the run game going, and our offense will need to be more consistent, especially in the red zone. The past 2 weeks, there's been a few like times we've gotten to the red zone but haven't converted. I don't think we're going to be able to afford to do that as much. Yes, our defense is going to keep us in it, but it can only carry you so much. So I'm really going to need to see more from the offense and from Scott Turner because, like Heineke, he's had some great drives, but he's also had some really bad ones, especially after he, like the drives he throws picks. They're some of the worst picks I think I've ever seen. But yeah, it's a winnable game, but I just think it'll come down to our offense is really need to step up.
Now, this is going to be a weird question, but it plays into how I think the game will go. Do you know what time the game is? Is that
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock? All right. I think the Vikings have a substantially better chance then because
Yeah, it's not prime time. If it
Kirk
was
Cousins
prime
is
time,
yeah,
yeah.
Kirk Cousins is terrible on prime time.
Yep.
Secondly, there's a couple memes out there, but they're true, and it's Kirk Cousins in a random week 9 game that means absolutely nothing. It just goes off 400 yards,
Yeah.
5 touchdowns.
But
So
as soon as it's prime time, he craps the bed.
yeah, so it is going to be interesting to see. I think Kirk Cousins will have a game coming back to Washington. I mean, he had a decent career in Washington, so he wasn't
Yeah.
terrible. And then obviously Justin Jefferson. I got mixed up between Jay Jettas, Justin Jefferson. He's going to give the secondary a world of trouble.
But
Then
they've been playing a little better. I'm actually more worried about Dalvin Cook.
he's also. I mean, they just have so many weapons offensively, and they also just traded for T.J.
Jay
Hawkinson,
Hawkinson.
which I don't know how much of an effect he'll actually have on the game due to he just got traded. He's going to need some time to learn the playbook, but he's another big playmaker. So I feel like once they do get him going, and again, I think this will be after the Washington game, they're going to be running a lot of 12 personnel because then you get all your best playmakers on the field. You have Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and then on top of that, you got T.J. Hawkinson, Dalvin Cook, and Irv Smith, two great pass-catching tight ends, two really good wide receivers, and one of the best running backs in the game. They got a lot of weapons up there on their offense. So, again, I don't think that'll really play a big factor in the Washington game, but come the future, that's going to be a dangerous team to be going against. But with that, I don't think Washington really, unless their offensive line, or unless their defensive line really gives the offensive line trouble, which that is a very good possibility.
It's very possible.
The Vikings offensive line is young. They still need to form chemistry. They're not quite in sync yet, so it is very possible for the defensive line to give the Vikings offensive line trouble, and if they do and help out the secondary, then they have a chance. But if Kirk Cousins is working with 3-4 seconds in the pocket every play, he is going to dot up the Washington secondary. No doubt in my mind. So it'll be a tale of two different teams, and it'll all depend on how the defensive line works against the Vikings offensive line.
Yeah, for me, like my key to victory for this game, I think is down to the run game that's on the running backs and both the offensive line, because if we add that to our offense and we're not like one dimensional, I think we can prove we could give the Vikings defense some trouble, because we saw this last week against the Colts when we can't get that run game going and we don't have these amazing like clutch drives. The first touchdown drive and the last one, we really struggle. And again, I think as part of it's down to Scott Turner, but again, I think it's down to the play. We simply have to get the run game going to be successful. If we don't, it'll be very difficult to win.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting game. And then this is another one of those games where it's like, yeah, maybe it's not the greatest opponent, but you got to come out and play at your best because Washington is at a stage right now where they're not a hard team to beat, but the
We're not
mental
exactly the
I was gonna
easiest.
say the mental space that they're in right now, going on a 2 game win streak. They beat Aaron Rodgers, who already go is going down. He's going into the Hall of Fame. He is a legend at the quarterback position. You beat Aaron Rodgers at home. That's a big win. And then you go out and you win a close game in Indy. The mental space there, and then add on to the fact we'll just go right into it now is Dan Snyder potentially selling the team. Which
This
yes,
is a this is a real litmus test for where this team is now in terms of play and coaching. I think the fans, like I said earlier, you're going to see a lot more passionate fans at the game. And you could possibly see more Washington fans at the game. You're going to at least see a different energy. But this is big news for the team. I can honestly say it's one of my like when that news came out, one of my best days as a fan. I'm not gonna like completely like believe in it yet. I'm still like wary until it happens, but
yeah, because all he did
it
was hire a bank to help him sell the
yeah,
team.
I believe Jeff Bezos is in it, but I'm not sure if that would work out because he just bought Thursday Night Football like Amazon did. So I don't know how that's gonna work out, but the other
Buying
guy,
Thursday Night Football did not put any dent in Jeff Bezos' pocket.
no,
But
but
I see what you're saying. It could be a
I think
conflict of interest.
yeah, I think they may like not allow it because of that. And the other guy who's looking to buy it, it's Byron Allen, who tried to buy the Broncos. I think that could be interesting, but yeah, I'm just really excited. And one cool thing I saw on Twitter is RG3 is looking to become a minority owner, and he's gonna take 10 fans with him, and he's gonna pay for him. So I think that's really cool. Um, to see that, and it just feels like something's different, and they're possibly talking about a name change, which I'm all for because Commanders, it just doesn't feel all that great.
I was I was going through I'm going through my football cards right now, and I just have so many Redskins cards. And so the way I organized my stuff is like I have Titans and Houston Oilers cards, and I have the Oilers as like just at the end of my cards is like a historic thing. I'm gonna have to do
Mm-hmm.
that with the Redskins after I start getting some Commanders cards or uh,
Yeah, well,
whatever the new team is because I have no Washington football team cards.
yeah, I hope they find a way to get the Red Wolves name because I think there's so many great possibilities. You can bring back the yellow helmet from the 70s. You can have that R logo, but with like a wolf tail. You can have the W, but it's like claw marks.
Yeah.
There's so many things you can do with the Red Wolves, and I just think that they kind of dropped the ball. This is an old Redskins helmet. If you just replace this arrow with like a wolf tail, you could even do that. Like you can pay homage to these older things, and I just don't think they really did that all that well with the Commanders. And I just when the new ownership does come in, hopefully, I think they're gonna want to rid the team of the Dan Snyder stink. So I think a name change is very possible, even going on towards inevitable. So really great day for Washington fans. Should be a national holiday. When if he does sell, it should be an international holiday.
They Now the one thing is with a new owner, obviously it's not going to make that much of an effect on the team. But
No,
I think in physically it won't make that much of a difference. Mentally though, I mean, just like you said,
it's
Dan
gonna
Snyder just is a looming black cloud over the team. I
yeah,
feel
it's gonna get rid of so much baggage, and we're gonna see a proper GM hired. Like we need to get rid of the current GM we have. We need to like go back. What teams have had an owner be the GM and have actually been successful? None.
none to my knowledge. I've
And that's what's been happening again and again and again. And unless you're somebody like Bill Belichick,
Now, I think that owners do have a say in like what happens because I know not Jerry Jones, Jeff Lurie for the Eagles. He's obviously he doesn't make the decisions. Howie Roseman does, but I mean, you saw last season where it's like the Eagles just kept on passing and passing and passing, and Jalen Hurts just wasn't ready for that. And it's like, I think Jeff Lurie was in their ear like, hey, I want to pass the ball. Like, we need to be a passing offense. So I think that the owner has a little bit of an effect on what happens in the team. But yeah, they're not a full GM.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but again, you have a proper GM. That's the way you win in this league. And unless you're Bill Belichick, and like having the coach as the GM does not work. Yes, they should have say, but a proper GM, I think, is like a key to victory, and it's been proven throughout history. So I think that's something that'll really help. And I think like one thing is I hope like once the owner comes in, he understands that he's not like a top football mind, and he hires the proper people who are. And I just think it'll get like rid of a big cloud that's been looming over the team for over 20 years. I think it'll be a lot more likely to get that RFK site because it is federally owned, so they have to approve of that site. And I'm even if we were to get a new owner, I don't think they would get taxpayers to pay for it. So the owner would need to be willing to shell that out himself. So it's will it make a huge team like difference in terms of like the team directly? Maybe not, but I just think it'll get rid of a huge weight that this team's been carrying around.
And one last thing to tack on for football is William Jackson traded to the Steelers for a couple of draft picks. Now,
Yeah,
that
I like the trade.
I was gonna say that shows that trade says usually if you guys are making a run, it's the opposite where you guys would be throwing out a couple picks for William Jackson to come here. So I think it's an interesting trade because to me that says like, hey, we're not really ready to win yet, and maybe we just make like an Eagles run in the playoffs like they did last season, where you somehow win enough games to get into the playoffs, get a little bit of experience with that single game, but you lose anyway. But I think that's an interesting trade because one, the Steelers don't seem like they need him because their team. Well, I mean they do. Their secondary is terrible, but they're another team who should be focusing on getting picks right now, not trading them away. So, I mean, I think it's an interesting trade all around. Obviously it's going to be interesting to see how it works out because William Jackson wasn't playing his greatest in Washington, but I think it's an interesting trade because it seemed like neither team really needed this trade. They actually needed it to be the opposite way, but it is interesting.
I like the trade because we got rid of that big contract, and with William Jackson, I think he can be successful, but like the system we play is completely different from the type of player he is. He's a man-to-man player, and we're a zone system. And Ron Rivera's come out and say our player evaluation was completely wrong. But I think that's something they should have caught even before we signed him. So I like the trade. We got rid of that big contract. We got a pick in return, and I just think it frees up possible chances in the off season to sign more interesting players that fit our system. And I think like if a new coach comes in and like we get a new GM, I think having that money open will really help us.
Now, I don't think is there anything else you have for the NFL?
Oh, one quick thing, maybe like we freed up that contract. Maybe we're going to look to re-sign Deron Payne again if he wants to stay again. That could be a reason why, but that's all I got.
All right, so moving over to the NHL, and while you were going through the at the beginning of this show, telling what we're gonna go through, say Flyers look to continue to impress, and honestly, if I'm gonna be honest, I feel that from the games I've seen recently and the things I've seen recently, I think the Flyers' lack of skill is finally starting to shine through the efforts that they put in games. One, like I said, they still have injuries all over the place. Secondly, you're starting to see those games where yes, they're fighting, but it's just not enough. They're not putting up goals. They're not getting shots on net. I mean, that's a hockey narrative that everyone goes with is get pucks on net, get pucks deep, all that. But
Yeah.
I mean, every game they are getting outshot by usually at least 10 shots. They are just getting outshot to oblivion. They haven't won a game since the last time we talked last week. They were 5-1 in that last week's when we were talking. This now they are 5-3-2, and I mean the two games that they lost in overtime, again battles that they had. They were tough games. They played Carolina in overtime. They went to overtime after being down by 2 and tied it up, went into overtime, lost 3-2, and then a Rangers game that they had. That was a 0-0 game all the way through the game, and they go into overtime and end up losing 1-0 off of a goal from Chris Kreider. But I think their lack of skill is finally starting to shine through their efforts, and I think this is going to be where the Flyers start to fall apart during the season. I think the Flyers' lack of skill finally catching up to them, and it's not that Carter Hart isn't playing, it's not the goalies. I think it's just they're not moving the puck well, and they just can't get the puck past these goalies. I mean, Igor Shesterkin is an amazing goalie to start out with, but
Yeah.
I mean, John Tavares just scored a hat trick on the Flyers. I think it's finally to the point where they're going to start going downhill, and it's where they're going to start looking for those draft picks. They are now 0-1-2 in the last week, and it's not going to get any easier as they play the Senators tomorrow.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough game because they're great offensively, but going to the Flyers, I've always been suspect of their goal scoring, and yeah, I think we're starting to see that. I still think they're playing better than a lot of people expected.
Yeah,
That's why
I
I
would
said
agree.
that. Yeah, but I just think, like you said, it's reaching that point where Tortorella's initial coaching it's taking them to a certain point, but with the talent he has currently, I think they've kind of reached the ceiling. So I'm interested to see what possible moves you do if you any. I wonder. I'll be interested to see if say you look to move Cam Atkinson, or if you look to move some other guys.
It's going to be real hard to move Cam Atkinson right now. He hasn't played a single game.
Yeah, or possibly JVR. I'm
JVR
surprised.
would be a big one to see move because he also has an enormous contract.
Yeah, but because he has that, it'd be hard to move. So I'm interested to see. But going on to the Caps.
Oh, one last thing before you move on to the Caps, and then we can. I'll tell you what. So yes, the offense is struggling, and they are missing some shooting pieces. But Owen Tippett, who was brought in that Claude Giroux trade, and everyone hoped would be the mind to just be shoot, shoot, shoot. First off, I am starting to see that shoot, shoot, shoot mindset from him, and you do see a couple beautiful passes. But he had one goal the other night. It was against Toronto, and as a lefty, So as a lefty, you'd kind of want to get the shot in the inside and have a second to get it. I actually think he's a righty. It'd be on this side, but he was coming down the left wing wall and gets the puck on his stick, but it was kind of odd and kind of handcuffed him. But from outside and I think he was at the middle of the circle, but he was outside the circle. So I'll do a little drawing right here. He was right here, essentially, if you can see that. Right there. And rips a shot and gets it past Ilya Samsonov, which was just an insane shot. I mean, I think that shows a glimpse of what he can do and the skill that he does have. So I think he has a pretty good chance to maybe, have a decent season and be a part of the future. But I did want to mention that just he does look pretty good. Now we can go on to the Caps, and they are struggling. I mean, in the standings, the entire standings are flipped from what everyone thought they would be.
Yeah, and for me, it's down to the defense. Again, it's not playing good enough. The only one you can say is really doing okay is Orlov, but I mean, Carlson's now injured, but I think we should look to get rid of Carlson. I just think I've reached my wits' ends with him. He just
and
looks way
out too. You guys are falling apart.
Wilson's out. Hunter Brown's out for 6 to 8 weeks. We're really struggling. Wilson's still recovering from that torn Achilles, and the guys we have in just aren't performing. Evgeny Kuznetsov needs to go. I've
ready
said
to
this
sell?
last year, but I'm done with him. He looks way too lackadaisical. Dylan Strome looks so much better. He's one of the few people who's actually doing great. 9 points in 12 games. Ovi, I mean, he's doing great as well, 10 points in 12 games. But outside of that, we don't really get consistent scoring, especially from Anthony Mantha. I will look to move him. I think in the offseason, I think this is finally the year we're going to see a big retool. I think Kuznetsov needs to go, and I would honestly look to move him at the trade deadline because he just looks way too lazy playing it, and I'm getting tired of it. That's kind of been how a lot of our forwards and defensemen have been playing. Even Semin towards the end just looked lazy. Backstrom last year, who he was hurt, so I don't blame him for that. He played decent while hurt, though. It's just we look way too lazy. We're slow. We're old. Mantha needs to go. Again, he looks lazy. He's just way too inconsistent. And like the refreshing guys outside of Ovi have been, in terms of forward, have been Dylan Strome. But the things that have been carrying this team is the goaltending. Like our two goalies in Strome and Ovi have been undoubtedly the best players this year. Charlie Lindgren, who's our backup, who's 1-1-1 with a 3 goals against, but a 919 save percentage. That's pretty good for a backup. And going into Darcy Kemper, in 9 games, he's 4-4 with one overtime loss, with a 2.35 goals against and a 922 save percentage. That's a lot more. That's more than I thought we were getting from Kemper. But yeah, we're really struggling to find consistent scoring, and we dropped 2 overtime losses to the Hurricanes and the Knights, and we were playing better than them for a certain amount of time, but we just kind of blew it. And I think it's down to we're slow, we're not that great in the neutral zone, and I think that's down to guys like Kuznetsov. I think it's down to Mantha. It's down to our lack of depth. So I think some serious changes need to be made if things don't improve. I would find a new coach. I would get rid of Carlson, Kuznetsov, Mantha, Hagelin, Eller.
Man, you're ready to clean house.
What else can
Yeah,
we?
I mean, you like you said, you guys are getting old. I think it would be time to start looking for that. Like I said earlier, standings totally flipped on its head right now. The only two
Yeah, and
teams who are doing what was expected are the Rangers, who are finally starting to catch up to themselves.
yeah,
They looked bad at the start of the season, and
yeah,
Carolina, who another team kind of
yeah.
started off odd, but getting
And
back up.
Backstrom, it would nice to have that $9 million, but we don't know if he's ever going to recover from that injury because it's pretty serious. But I would keep Wilson because he's when he comes back, I still think he's going to play great. He's physical. He's actually pretty skilled for a big guy. He just needs to stay on the ice, frankly, whether it's he gets off due to injuries or dumb penalties and suspensions. But other than I think a lot of fans are really done with some of these players. Like Kuznetsov, again, he should be better, but all I see when he's out there, he just looks like he's slow. He doesn't really look like he skates hard, and it doesn't really seem like he scores like points. It's weird. Like he should be better, but he's just not. He's 7 points in 11 games, but he just doesn't play well, in my opinion. The power play, it's still shaky. We still need to find some find a way to
Score.
work with it, and we just haven't. It's just hard. And yeah,
Well,
I don't think Laviolette's going to be the coach next year, and I don't want him to be.
I will tell you what. When first off, do you remember what I said when you guys hired Laviolette? Get ready for 3 years of mediocrity. I think hit that one right on the nose. But
Yeah, it's this third year. I mean, the third year that's really hitting us, and yeah, I mean,
I do have to say,
hope,
with your power play, I mean, when some of your top power play guys are out, like Backstrom, Oshie, and Carlson,
yeah,
that's going to make the power play a lot easier to cover. I mean, because the one thing that made the power play so deadly from the Caps was the fact that you had Backstrom and the Ovi connection. If you cover Ovi, you have Carlson who could do something from the back.
or
You cover,
Oshie or Wilson
yeah,
down low. Yeah,
you cover Carlson. You got Oshie in the middle. You got Tom Wilson in the middle. Like there was just so many. There was no piece that was a weakness on your power play one. Now
Hmm.
with so many injuries, you have liabilities, and
Yeah,
it's what it
Strom
comes down to.
and Ovi have looked good, but outside of that, it's hard to say that any of these forwards have looked good. Mantha, again, way too inconsistent. I just don't like his playing style. I think he should be better if he hustled, but he just doesn't. It just
Yeah.
doesn't seem like he does.
One last thing I want to mention before we move on is I wanted to go over the standings. First off, New Jersey at the top of the division
I
at
knew I told you.
8-3-0 with 16 points in 11 games. Carolina then second with 10 games played, 15 points, 7-2-1. The Islanders, another shocking surprise to me, 7-4-0 with 14 points in 11 games. 12 games played for the Rangers, they're 6-4-2 with 14 points. Flyers number 5, 10 games played, 5-3-2 with 12 points. Washington with 12 games played, 5-5-2 with 12 points. And then Pittsburgh and Columbus bringing up the rear. Pittsburgh 11 games played, 4-5-2 with 10 points, and Columbus just 10 games played, 3 wins and 7 losses and 6 points. I mean, Columbus needs to step it up. I
Yeah,
thought
I thought they'd be better.
I thought they would at least make a wild card. I mean, I know I said I didn't really like Columbus, and I still don't, but I thought they'd at least make a wild card with Johnny Gaudreau and Patrick Laine. Hockey's not a game where you can have one superstar. Actually, I guess that's a lie because the Oilers do it every year with Leon
Well, they
Draisaitl.
well they
They've
have
added
two.
pieces, yeah. They
Yeah,
they've
they have two superstars, and they have
they've
some
also
decent
added
depth pieces.
Zach Hyman, who plays pretty well. They also have Evander Kane. They have Darnell Nurse on the back end. So
Tristan
they
Vari,
yeah
Vari, I think his name is.
they've added some decent pieces, but I mean, the Oilers are a team that really exemplify that sometimes you can win with a superstar. But Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are unlike anyone else in the league. They are generational talents. They Connor McDavid is probably the best thing since Wayne Gretzky that you're going to get in the NHL. So that's a difference. I think any team that you put Connor McDavid on, he's going to make that big of a difference, in my personal opinion. So that's what I think. Anything else in the NHL for you?
No.
All right. So before we move on to the World Series, the last time we will be talking the one of the last times that we'll be talking about the World Series because it will be decided this weekend. I do want to mention Baumburger Food Truck. They're a food truck out of Loudoun County, based out of Lovettsville, small town up here in Loudoun County, but they make really good burgers. They go around Loudoun. They are starting to expand more. They are kind of like a smash burger type of burger. They just improved their recipe, so check them out. They're using all the right ingredients, getting all the grass-fed beef, all the farm, all the best ingredients they can get. So if you guys want to check them out, go check them out. They have Instagram and Facebook at Baumburger Food Truck where they post where they're going to be and all their events. So if you want to check them out, go check them out there. And they also do cater. So go ahead and look for a Baumburger Food Truck. Look them up. Going to the World Series, I gotta say it's not looking good for the Phillies. I think their spark has finally started to run out. I mean, the Houston Astros pitching has finally caught up to it. They're in the first couple games, their pitching was not doing great, and that was a big difference maker. But in the past 2 games, the Phillies offense have been held to 2 runs, and they were averaging 7 runs a game at home. I thought if the Phillies go 2-1 in Philly, they could win the game, but or the World Series, excuse me. But it's not looking good for them. This is not a good scenario for the Phillies to be in right now, going into Houston down 3-2. I,
Yeah, and especially after last night's loss, I think that's definitely
yeah,
demoralizing. It was
honestly,
three
that
to
was
two.
such a close.
Yeah, and for I think Mrazek, whatever that center fielder's name is, to make that big
Oh,
catch towards the
McCormick,
end
yeah,
of the
Chaz
game.
McCormick. That was a
Yeah, that's
huge play.
really gotta hurt. And the game before that, to the Astros got a combined no hitter, the
Yeah,
second one in World Series history. I think that's
third one in
really,
playoff history.
yeah, that's really gotta hurt. So, yeah, I think it's
It's
gonna be a steep
it
climb to.
it's gonna need a miracle in order for the Phillies to pull this one out. I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to be hard to win 2 games in Houston. They might be able to steal. Now, they might be able to steal one, and if they do steal one, they might I mean, anything can happen in a game seven. That's when you get it. That's when you get excited because that's that one game where everything goes down. But it's if they somehow were to outplay Houston in this game six on Saturday, I will be very surprised. I mean, obviously, I hope they do, but it's going to be hard, and their offense is going to need to get some sort of spark going again. I mean, especially on the road, they were not a team to really have it on the road. Go back to the wild card; they only scored five total runs. Oh no, excuse me, they scored eight, but they scored six in the ninth inning in game one against the Cardinals. So, but they only scored two in the second game. Go to the Braves game. Again, they had one breakout game on the road, and then after that, they kind of shut down, won a close game. In the Padres series, they won 2-0 in game one in San Diego. And then in game two, they only put up five when the Padres put up 10. So they definitely need to figure out how to score some runs on the road. And obviously, you have to score runs to win, but that's the only way that they even have a chance. They need to be scoring, 5, 6, 7 runs in these games.
Yeah, and with the Phillies, it seems like their offense is pretty much entirely based off of home runs. And when it works, for example, I think it was game three when you had 7 runs and all of them came off of home runs. That's like the top side of your offense. But we've seen in these last 2 games that it's hard to maintain. And the Astros are really taking advantage of that. They can't like hold up to the amount of home run hitting you guys do, but their situational hitting is a lot better than your guys' hitting. So, and I think we're obviously seeing that. So it's going to be a difficult game six because the Astros, they've been here and they can smell it.
And they've done that. I mean, it's they say throughout the playoffs constantly is solo home runs don't win games in the playoffs. You need that situational hitting. You saw it last night again in the game six, and you saw the Phillies. Now I saw it was a stat that they had before where when the Phillies have runners and score when they win games, they had like 24 runs with 2 outs in the playoffs, and when they lose games, they only had 1 run with 2 outs. You saw it again last night. I think they had a single run with 2 outs yesterday. They just aren't producing the same offense that they did when they are down 2 outs and like look like they're about to be out. So that's huge. And also, I mean, some of their players just look. Nick Castellanos has yet to hit a home run in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He has nothing going on in the playoffs. Bryson Stott has been slowing down. He was usually one of our really good contact hitters, using the entire field and just getting those bloopers right over the infield to get right into the outfield, getting those base hits. He's been struggling. Gene Segura's been struggling to put the bat on the ball. I mean, really, you've seen Rhys Hoskins strike out a lot. Aside from really Bryce Harper and probably Kyle Schwarber, you just see the offense as a whole struggling. They're not putting the bat on the ball much. Brandon Marsh has shown sparks, but Alec Boehm, he was batting 400 in the month of July, and he hasn't done anything. He's slowed down a ton. Like I said, Bryson Stott, Gene Segura, both two really good contact hitters, not doing much. Rhys Hoskins, who was just an absolute monster in Philadelphia in the playoffs, hasn't done anything in the World Series. So, I mean, it's not looking good. It's definitely hurting to watch this one.
And we're starting to see the pitching depth of the Astros come into effect. We saw that combined no-hitter. We saw them keep the Phillies to 2 runs. And your pitching in this previous game did great, but I think that loss is demoralizing because you pitched great, which it's going to be very hard to do this next game, but you still lost. So I think that's going to be very difficult. You're probably going to be pitching like all your starters are going to be available in the bullpen, but with the Astros, they just have a deeper pitching staff.
Now, it's going to be interesting to see because the Astros have used their top bullpen guys in all of the previous games. Not all the previous games, but in the last 2 games. They used Brian Abreu. I want to say Brian Abreu went for 1 2/3 yesterday. Then Rafael Montero went for an inning. He ended up giving up a lot of hits, and they pulled him. So Rafael Montero went down for a little bit yesterday and the night before, so he's played 2 games in a row. And Ryan Presley went for a couple games in. He's gone for 2 games in a row, and he went for the 5-out save in this last game. So it's going to be interesting to see how they work their pitching from that. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens there.
Do you know who'd be pitching Game 6 for the Phillies? Would it be?
I think it's going to be Wheeler. I think it's going to be Wheeler, and then Framber Valdez for the Astros.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Zach Wheeler hasn't exactly had the best.
He didn't have a great outing in the. He didn't have a great outing in the Astros game. In the playoffs, he's been pretty decent, but against the Astros, he gave up 5 runs. That's another big piece of this is Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler just haven't been performing in these games. So that's another piece that is a huge factor in the World Series. So Zach Wheeler's going to need to pitch the best game of his life, and the bullpen's going to have to shut out the offense again like they did yesterday. So it's going to be rough.
This Astros team, they're pretty experienced.
They're rolling right now.
They can be beat. We've seen that against the Braves, and we've seen that against us, but it's going to be very difficult because I think Verlander, he's hungry to get a ring. I just think that this team is going to be very difficult.
Yesterday was Verlander's first ever win in the World Series.
Yeah, that I have seen that stat before, but yeah, that's crazy. I think we could possibly see him out of the bullpen.
That's what I was thinking. He could probably come out of the bullpen a little bit.
Yeah, or at least one of the other starters.
What was his name? The guy who pitched in Game 4, Game 4.
Not Javier.
Yeah, Javier. No, it is Javier. I think.
Javier.
The guy who pitched in the combined no-hitter.
Yeah, that guy.
He was absolutely detrimental to the Phillies offense. What was weird about it is he pitched like a relief pitcher, in my opinion. Like, he really only used 2 pitches. He uses a slider and a fastball, but he uses those 2 and just absolutely makes you look silly with them because the way that he releases it, they said it on the broadcast, they come from the same spot, and the spiral on his slider is so tight that it looks like it's going to be a fastball and then just dips away from you. So he looks like he plays like a relief pitcher, but has the stamina to go 7 innings, and that is just insane. So they probably won't start him again because they said he's only pitched over 100 pitches twice in his entire career. He's young, and he pitched somewhere between 92 and 96 pitches. I don't remember on the dot which one it was, but he pitched somewhere in between there, so he's probably going to need the full 5 days, which means I don't think he would be ready for Game 7. But they'll probably use him out of the bullpen, which will be rough for the Phillies.
They also have Lance McCullers if they need to use him too.
Lance McCullers was one who struggled against the Phillies. So if we can somehow get past Framber Valdez and get into a Lance McCullers starting in Game 7, they might have a chance. But it's
going to be hard to get past the pitching in Game 6. And with
Framber Valdez also had a heck of a game against the Phillies in Game 2.
And with Phillies, the last game you used 6 pitchers. That's
a lot of the bullpen. And they used a lot of their big guys too. Eflin closed out the game.
They used their best bullpen arms.
Sir Anthony Dominguez, he struggled a bit.
You saw Robertson have a good outing, but he's older. It's going to be hard for him to pitch for Game 6.
Robertson scares me. He has games where it's like, okay, you're pitching well, and then he has games where it's like, dude, what are you doing? You just gave him a meatball right over the middle. So Robertson scares me.
He was like that with the Yankees.
They also say that with they also said that on the broadcast that they want him to be one of their trusted guys, one of the Alvarados, one of the Sir Anthony Dominguez's and Eflins. But he's just so streaky that you can't really trust him to be one of those guys. So he's one that they struggle to have going, but it's not looking good for Philly. They needed to go 2-1 in Philadelphia, and they didn't. And I think that really, just demoralizes the team. That's where, they were saying that was like a football crowd. They had a football type crowd in a baseball stadium, and the Astros did what they needed to and took the crowd out of it, And I think that's why they went 2-1 in Philly, and that's why I think they're going to win the World Series now. Because you're going back home, you have your home crowd behind you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not looking
Yeah,
good.
Houston.
But with that, that's all I have for this week. Is there anything else from you?
That's all I got.
All right, so if you guys want to, you guys can rate and review us on Spotify and Apple. You guys can put a review. If you put a question in there, we can read it out on here. You guys can check out our Instagram and TikTok where we post big trades, big updates, and moves like that right on this side. And then you can email us questions and comments. That was the right side, Jacob. At the email, also on this side, beyondthedc@gmail.com. And we come out with this every week. We also have a YouTube, Brotherly Love in the District, where we do weekly football predictions. So if you guys want to go check those out, go look those up at those at YouTube. And we just did a tier list on all of the
Reverse
NHL
retros.
reverse retro jerseys. So that one
Check
is
that out.
also up. So if you guys want to go check those stuff out, that's all Brotherly Love in the District on YouTube. So with that, we are going to end it off there, and we will see you guys next week.
See you later.